Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Desktop Developer Show. I'm the host, Walt Richer, and this week and every week we talk about what we like about working in the desktop. Cool graphics programs, smart clients, and many other techniques. And I'm joined this week by my co-host, Billy Hollis. How are you today?
How you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited this week. We're going to be talking about cross-platform development. Using one of your and my favorite tools, which is XAML and C#.
Yeah, that when I first saw the product that we'll be talking about today, it was one of the more exciting things in the last 5 years for me, because the ability to take all this, XAML has just been my world, technically speaking, since 2007-ish, and to be able to take that and start to project out to Android and iOS and into the browser was just, I was thrilled when I first heard about this.
Yeah, and you've actually you've used, we're talking about Uno today, and you've used it for some projects?
I have. I've converted quite a number of my demos over to it and done some prototyping for people with it. I haven't done a production project with it yet, but I think we're getting to the point where people will feel like that's a viable option for some, especially for some of their mobile apps, because it's one of the cleaner ways to get the reach to both iOS and Android, as well as getting a free Windows 10 app in the bargain.
And I hear there's a number of new things. Like I understand there's a Mac support now, but we should probably talk to Jérôme about this today.
I bet he knows a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah, and I bet you they've been building all sorts of cool stuff to get ready for the Build conference that was this week. Is that right, Jérôme?
That's right. It's been quite intense a few months just to target the Build. Yes.
Yeah, and you were in at least one session I saw this week. You was the one for the WinUI stand-up, I think it was.
Yeah, it was the WinUI community stand-up. They do that every month, and it's hosted by Ryan, Anna, and a few other people, and Jérôme Laban as well. That's Savoy knows lots of superstars from WinUI, so it's very interesting to see, and always learning new things. And with the announcements that they made with WinUI 3 and the alignment that we're making with Uno, that made perfect sense for to talk about it during that call.
Yeah, and so what are some of the new exciting things that you've added to make it to this Build deadline?
So it's for the Build deadline. So quite a few things. The first one that we announced actually last week, I think it was a Friday, and it's the macOS support. So that one has been a big ask for, I think, since the beginning 2 years ago that we open source Uno, and there was twofold about that one. The first one was, can I develop using macOS? So if I have a machine, I want to develop there to do iOS, and the other one was, I want to make apps for macOS, and that one, those two were big asks, and we were looking at a few things around what Apple was going to be doing, especially with their new Catalyst framework, which is kind of a port of iOS over to macOS to allow for iOS apps to run on the Mac untouched, and that is something that we're still waiting for. It's still moving. Probably the WWDC is going to change a few things there, but what drove the announcement specifically for Build was the fact that when we enabled the macOS target for Uno, is that we were able to port the Windows calculator that we put it over to iOS, Android, and web over to macOS as well. So that application is available in the Mac App Store, and you could have the Windows calculator there.
That's exciting.
It is. So
any other new items?
Yes. So any other new items? It's aligning for the WinUI 3. So WinUI 3 is all about Microsoft lifting their source out so that they can allow for developers to target multiple windows at once without having to determine which one is going to be available for the user. But also the fact that the developer can follow their own development, they follow the WinUI development when they want at their own pace, and not following what the Windows team is providing. And that's been a big ask. And for us, it was about changing the Uno source code, which is using the UWP and WinRT API set, which is using the windows.ui.xaml namespace, over to the new namespace, which is microsoft.ui.xaml. That's a big breaking change for everyone, but it's not that big of a deal in terms of changing your code over to the new platform, to the new version. So you basically open Visual Studio, do find and replace in all files, and then target one namespace to the other. That's the main thing. And for Uno, well, it was a bit more work, but basically we have a new set of NuGet packages that target WinUI. So that means that you can build an application using WinUI on Windows, and also a WinUI API set on iOS, Android, web, and now macOS.
I've budgeted next week to get WinUI 3 and just work through it, because I got lots of demos I can put over there, and particularly with the Uno implementation. So I'm looking to, because I don't really understand this, because I hear from other influencers that, I guess I'm in a different space or something, but I'm going out to see a client in a couple, 3 weeks, that starting up with them from scratch, and they're looking to make a big chunk of their development in native and desktop technologies. They got some stuff they want to do on the web as well, but the ability to go to all these different platforms and to use something that's pretty mature and that's very responsive, and I don't know, am I just talking to a different set of people than all these folks who are going, I don't understand why anybody's doing desktop development anymore? What's your take on that?
That's a bubble question. Depending on how you present yourself, you're going to get a set of clients that definitely attract to your, let's say, your experience. And we've seen that Uno was based on the, let's say, the development of the nventive company, so the mother company of Uno platform. And we've been developing the Uno platforms for about 6 years. And nventive was about mobile application mainly, and that means when you're doing mobile clients, mobile users and developers are going to come to you, and they're not going to come to you to do desktop development. And then when we started adding WebAssembly, that's where it changed quite a bit of the narrative. And then you say, oh, we can do the desktop deployment using standard web deployment technologies and not have to worry about all the stores and things like that. As you can deploy once and then it gets everywhere. So that's in terms of determining what bubble you're in, it really depends on how you present yourself. And for Uno platform, having the ability to target all those types of clients, especially now we've seen that with the addition of the data grid that we did recently with the Windows Community Toolkit. It attracts a lot of line of business developers that are, I wouldn't say not interested into making mobile apps. That's not the truth. They want to go to mobile, but they have so much data to show on the screen that it doesn't fit on a mobile device. It has to be on a very large screen, and it sometimes has to have a local access because of legacy applications or things like that. So it's not always a clear cut to get all there.
That's an interesting point you mentioned on the large amount of data on a screen. I know I've worked for clients. I did some brokerage consulting work, and multiple monitors with both monitors completely covered in UI with hundreds of data points on the screen. And like you said, that's really hard to put on a mobile screen unless you're going to be swiping sideways or up and down for a long time.
Exactly. And you have to have designers and UX specialists to be able to do that kind of things on a mobile device. And it's not always useful. If you're a desk worker or you're on an industrial machine or something like that, it doesn't make sense to have that kind of things. Having a pretty UI that runs on a let's say a very, very large industrial machine, it's not useful. But you want something to run there that's easy to deploy and that is using common technologies and things like that. So that's it's very different audiences, and we see that with Uno. We have mobile developers that want to do Android, iOS. We have Mac OS users because they have Mac OS, large base of Mac laptops or PCs. Desktops that are deployed, and then you have the whole set of IoT devices. And we announced yesterday that we're going to be working on the Linux backend for Uno as well. So nice. Everything that goes along with IoT is something that's very interesting as well. And then you get all the web stack, and even the web is its own set of large, because you can go to mobile, you can go to large screen, you can go to the browser with desktops. Then it's so large.
It sounds like you started. You said this started off as an internal project.
It did.
You were building a framework for building apps for your customers, I'm guessing.
Yes. It was. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, it was something that was very interesting at the time. Xamarin was still. I think it was still named. It wasn't Xamarin at the time, or maybe it was, but it was MonoTouch and MonoDroid at the time. It wasn't Xamarin, iOS, and Android, and it was very interesting because the big wave of Windows 8 and Windows Mobile 7 series at the time, I think it was called. That was Microsoft, helping companies build applications for that. And then the wave passed because Microsoft had some issues with Windows Mobile, I think, and we had a pool of developers that wanted to develop. That were able to develop on XAML, C# and Windows, and we said, well. We had clients that said, "Well, you're able to make applications that work really well on Windows. Can you help us do the same thing for iOS and Android?" And then we tried a few things with Xamarin, iOS, and Android natively. Using the APIs from the platform. It was not a clear success. I mean, it requires two sets of developer mindsets, and it's very hard to find people that do that kind of development. It requires someone that knows Windows, that knows C#, that knows intimately iOS and intimately Android and eventually macOS. So that's very hard to find. And so we started to say, well, just why not do the same thing that we do on Windows and just port over a few things? And then we started over and implement a few controls like stack panel, grid, and things like that over iOS and Android, and it started working. And then one thing led to another. We had a XAML parser that generated code. We implemented something that was based off of C#6 source generator that are now very hot in C#9. All about generating code from XAML over to making some C#, and then that's where it got very interesting because of WebAssembly, and we said, well, that's too big for us. I mean, we have to have people just be interested into this, and we open sourced it 2 years ago. So that was based out of an actual need, and we are still needing. We do still need Uno at this point to make applications. That's why it's continuing evolving, and now with the new clients coming in that are helping us, shape the future of Uno.
I'm gonna take a try at something here as part of this investigation into WinUI, Uno, etc. Back in I don't know, it's probably 2010. I redid my personal website in Silverlight. I was one of the few people to do that, and of course, not long after that, the mobile people go, "Oh, your site doesn't load here, and I don't want to install an extension." So now I'm ready to take sort of a modernized version of that design and actually implement it in Uno, so I can run a website on WebAssembly. I think I'm a little bit early in the curve on that. I don't know that I see a lot of sites trying to do that, but I'm going to take a stab at it.
Oh, that's so interestingly, lots of people are starting to do the kind of thing. So the only thing that can cause trouble is SEO, and that's where the crossing between what we're calling web apps and websites is. There's a big difference between the two. So let's say you wouldn't make a site like the New York Times site completely developed in a spa application, because if you do, then you're going to be having troubles with people that don't have the enough power to do that kind of things when to look that up or to open it up, or it's not going to load up in 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. It's going to take time to load. If you think Gmail, when you open it up, it doesn't take 100 milliseconds to load. It takes way more than that. So that's where you have to think about, am I doing a website or am I doing a web app? And that's where the shift can be. That being said, you can definitely do the kind of thing and probably have a hybrid approach. Let's say you have outer edge that is a website, and then the inner site, the inner part that is a web app. So it helps you SEO, and then you can have still the dynamic aspect of having a web app running inside.
I can do the hard parts in XAML.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. How to coerce a framework, an HTML framework into doing it.
Now, this kind of architecture problem you're talking about, which is web app versus website, that's not just limited to Uno. It's a fundamental problem that anybody that's thinking about putting something on the web has to deal with.
Absolutely.
Especially when you say SEO, if you want trying to make bring people to your site or sell something, advertisements, you need that SEO.
Exactly. So there are fancy tricks that happen, like pre-rendering and updating. You pre-render a default page which can be crawled, and then having something that links up to having your app that links up to the existing DOM that's already available. That's the kind of thing that exists. That can enhance that experience in a way, but it still is at the back. It's it cannot be crawled easily because it's dynamic.
But some of the stuff I saw from Build this week about WebAssembly was some pretty significant performance improvements.
Oh yeah,
that are evolving there. So this
Yes.
approach becomes more practical all the time, because I'm presuming once you do get to the point where some of these performance improvements have evolved another generation or two, then some of these issues of loading and such will be lessened.
Yes, absolutely. And WebAssembly is, so for the listener that may not know about it, it's all about executing a binary code in the browser inside of the security sandbox of the browser. So it's not like Silverlight, it's not like any other Java applets that may have security issues, or Flash for that matter. That's the biggest example that you could find for that kind of things. It's all about running in the same security context, so you can't get out of the box. So aside if there is a bug in the browser, but and there are many languages that are now able to target WebAssembly. So you basically build your application down to, it can be Ruby, C#, Java, PHP. There's even a MS build that targets now
Right.
that can run inside of the browser. So that's the main point of WebAssembly. And if we are talking specifically about the .NET development space, that has progressed significantly in the past over the past, let's say, year and a half. The main part is that there are two modes for running WebAssembly, or to run .NET in WebAssembly. The first one is the interpreted mode, which is used by Blazor as well at this time. And basically what it does is, take the DLL that you have and built in your application and executes, deconstructs the IL that's inside of the assembly and executes that over an engine that's built on WebAssembly. So it's nice because you can have everything running right away, but the problem is that it's very slow. So what I mean by very slow, we're talking about something like 25 to 30 times slower that code that is compiled directly to WebAssembly. And that part is, it's a big problem. And let's say if you were to make a website, if you were making a website using that technology, that specific one, let's say using the interpreter and completely the interpreter, you may run, if you're doing too much of, let's say too much of work directly in the client, it may cause some trouble performance-wise. That's where there's AOT that comes in, and AOT has been used. I think it was I think it was originally meant for Xamarin.iOS at the
You want to explain what AOT is?
So, my apologies. Yeah, AOT is ahead of time compilation. So the point of AOT is to take the IL that comes from an assembly down to the machine code that's compatible with the device that you're running on. So for instance, if you're on iOS, it's going to be ARM64. If you're on an Android, it's going to be something else. If you're on a PC, it's going to be x86 or x64. And on the browser, it's going to be WebAssembly. So there's a path that basically takes your IL code and your DLLs and turns them into WebAssembly. And the problem at this point for that specific part of converting to AOT is that the end result is quite big. And there's been lots of work that has been done over on the Xamarin Android side, interestingly, which if you paid attention, it's called the startup tracing. And it's something where they're doing kind of a mix between native code and JITted or interpreted code at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it makes for very fast advancement there. And as of today, I've made advancements for WebAssembly where I can use that mode, which makes for AOT being really smaller on the web, so kind of dividing by 2 the payload. And that's been one of the critics for AOT at this point.
we keep solving the same problem. That's just the thing about being old, because all the parallel problems you just talked about were around in the early days of .NET too.
Oh yeah,
we had the just-in-time compilation, the bytecode, and then we had the ability to run it so that was done ahead of time.
NGen.
Yeah, NGen. So
yeah, well, in this business, every 5 years or so, things advance. We have new technologies and new ways of thinking about things, and so we try new things, and then we run into the issues, right? The technical issues,
Definitely.
and then we try to solve it. I mean, that's one of the exciting things about being in this business is
solving things.
yeah, I'm not sure that everybody thinks it's an exciting thing. Well,
okay, fair enough.
I know people that kind of wish things would stand still for a while so they don't have to keep running just to stay in place.
I feel that way someday. You know, I teach, I do courses for LinkedIn Learning, and part of my job is to figure out what's the next big technology, or what should we talk about? What courses should I do for next year? And so a lot of times there's a lot of learning involved with new technologies, and it can be exhausting.
Yes, and that's why Uno is interesting, because it's not new, in a sense.
Yeah,
it's reusing all the.
That's what attracted me. I didn't have to start from scratch with something.
Exactly.
Well, that was my expertise stack.
Yeah, that was you mentioned Blazor, and you were talking about that, and there's 2 points I'd like to investigate a little bit further. One is Blazor is obviously a Microsoft technology that's basically using WebAssembly to do something similar to what you're doing with Uno.
Yes.
And you've taken kind of I want to say the same approach, but you're building something similar. But I think there's a lot of differentiators. One, of course, is that your markup is in XAML instead of HTML and Razor syntax. And the other is, of course, I can write my code in C#. So for like Billy and I said at the beginning of the show, that's really exciting for us because we spent the majority of our career or a good portion of our career working with those technologies. So what differentiates you from the Blazor implementation?
So that's a good point. And we've announced some of our experiments that we're doing over at Uno to let's say reach the wider audience. And the interesting part is that Blazor can be on top of Uno in some ways. So the interesting part is, and in the same way you're going to see Microsoft doing experiments, or it's actually not an experiment now, with React Native. So React Native is running on top of WinUI. And the interesting part about this one is that they're basically not using an XAML. They're just exposing the native framework, which is when you have a text box, list view, things like that. They're basically exposing that through JavaScript and the React Native framework. So we're basically able to do the same thing with Blazor. And the interesting part is that Blazor has, you probably heard about the Blazor mobile bindings experiment that they're doing with Elon. And what they're doing is basically placing Blazor engine on top of Xamarin Forms. But it still is, 2 different. So when you're looking at Blazor, it's Blazor for HTML. So you're you're generating HTML so that it's displayed by the browser. And when you're using Blazor mobile bindings, it's another set of API. So you're actually closer to what React Native is doing in some ways, but it still is, it's Blazor, but not really. It's just there's one that's using the Xamarin Forms on one side, the other one is using HTML. And what we're doing is pretty much the same thing that Blazor Mobile is doing, except that we're targeting WinUI on top. So instead of using markup that's from Xamarin Forms or HTML, we're just using WinUI controls underneath. So it's not as black and white as it would have been. It's not competition one against the other. It's all about the programming models, and people are used to the Razor templates model and the it's not, I wouldn't say bindings, but the way to declare templates and update state and do what they call tree diffing to display content. So it's all about where you're coming from and what kind of programming model interests you the most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably worth sort of mentioning that Uno is great for somebody that already knows XAML, but XAML is not exactly an easy technology itself.
No, it's not.
And I talked about this some at your conference last fall when I sort of showed some interesting things in XAML, that it is a hill to climb. Once you climb it, you're able to do some amazing things. I'm hoping that maybe some of the WinUI stuff and the samples and the controls that sort of wrap up a lot of stuff so you don't have to learn as much will maybe bring that the hill you have to climb down a little bit. What's your feelings on that?
So the problem with XAML and WinUI and all of this is the fact that it's appealing only to Windows developers. And that's the big thing. I mean, it's kind of a problem. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's you're running exactly on Windows, so that means you can use all the features there. But the problem is that if there's an audience that wants to target on other platforms, they can't reuse anything. Or maybe you can reuse a little bit of the backend logic, but if or let's say non-UI logic, but everything else that is along with the UI, I mean, you cannot reuse, and that means that there are legions of developers. Those are Mac OS, they're doing web, they're doing Linux. They cannot use that technology. So that means that everything that you have with the communities that's around HTML, JavaScript, and things like that cross the boundaries of everything. Microsoft is not able to have that for WinUI, and that's why they keep having people asking for, when are you going to go with cross-platform WinUI? And that's what we're trying to do. And that's we wanted to have cross-platform for that.
That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to solve that problem.
Exactly.
And so how do you do that? So explain this to me. So I build a Uno app, and I use some controls. Like you said, you just added grid. I think you added grid and another control this week, smart swap panel. No, what was it?
So data grid and stack panel. Grid and stack panel, let's say. Yeah,
so grid, right? Not data grid. That's old technology.
Oh, data grid is still there. It's still there and kicking. I mean, it's something that people that are doing line of business apps are saying, I'm not using Uno until there's a data grid there. Yeah. I want to display data.
Yeah. So I put a grid on the UI and when my XAML, and I put some columns of controls in there. When it goes to render to all the other platforms, how does that happen? How does that work?
So what we're basically doing is adjusting the rendering engine based off on the platform that's running. So for instance, when we're talking about the stack panel is basically you have let's say a square, and you're putting items inside, and the stack panel is about stacking them vertically or horizontally. And what we're doing is, let's say you have a stack, and then inside you're going to be displaying some text. And that text is going to be stacked up in some ways. Depending on the platform, if you're on iOS, then we're going to take that stack and transforming it into something that iOS understands. And the text block that's going to be a UI label, which is the native control to display text. And same thing for edit controls, text box, list views, toggle switches, sliders, and other kind of controls that are there. On macOS, we're doing the same thing with AppKit. The controls are a little bit different, but very close. On Android, same thing, and on the web, we're using HTML to render that content.
So you're abstracting away. So for me as the developer, I just know I want to use the button or like you said, the text box, and it gets abstracted into the native. Are you using Xamarin for that?
So we're using Xamarin underneath. So when we're talking Xamarin, it's not Xamarin Forms, it's just Xamarin. So we're talking Xamarin iOS and Android. So it's going to be the projection of what the platform provides untouched. So we're using that directly.
It might help a little bit just to kind of show the Visual Studio solution that you get with the different things for the different platforms. I've got one right here.
You have one. Okay.
I just started a new Uno app using the template.
Let me try that again.
There we go. So you can kind of talk over this if you like, but there's
no problem.
iOS projects and.
So it's so what you get is probably you get an Android, iOS, Mac OS now. I see you have the latest templates and UWP, and then the WebAssembly project. So that's what it looks like. And so you get the main page .xaml, which is providing the default content that's in a shared project. So a shared project is kind of a linked file on steroids in a way, and we're using this to work around some issues that Visual Studio is still having. It's probably going to be changing in some ways when .NET 5 Web is coming up. And so in that XAML, you're basically just adding things in there, and that is going to be, so you have that grid and that text block. And that is going to be translated over to the native primitives that the platform understands.
It looks like the old Xamarin projects.
It does. It does. It does. It does. And it's something that's going to change quite a bit with .NET 5. And
I saw a demo where they had one project. I think it was Gallo. Kevin Gallo did a talk. Somebody did one. WinUI, I forget which one.
It's probably going to be Scott Hunter.
Oh, maybe.
That made some demos around that. And David Ardino as well that made a demo. So it's all about getting that access to platform features. And if you take a look at the way platform frameworks are rendering content, you get two ends of the spectrum. The first one is going to be I'm rendering pixels, complete pixels all the way. So that means that if I take my application, I cannot change. I can alter the way it looks, but based on the platform. But it's not the platform that's going to be rendering the content. It's pixels. So that means that there's an advantage for that route. Well, where you get complete fidelity for everything, but you're using access to the platform features. So that means that if you have to have IME, if you have to have text input accessibility features, that's the kind of things that are very hard to get right, because you have to hover many things to align properly, and for let's say government contracts, accessibility is key. It's kind of a requirement, so you can't get there very quickly. And the other end of the spectrum is frameworks that completely do only UI that comes from the platforms. So that means that you're completely high fidelity what the platform provides. But if you want to do pixel perfect designs because your designers are picky, then it's very hard to do, because you cannot, most of the platform controls are not, very easy to customize. And, your designs are going to be different between platforms. So what we chose is to be in between. And we're providing the ability to have pixel perfect designs, and the rendering engine is allowed to, do the same thing on every places using different rendering techniques, but also to use the platform primitives. So like so you don't lose accessibility and everything goes with text boxes and things like that when you want to do selection.
Sounds like every cross-platform tool has had to deal with these exact issues.
Absolutely.
But it does have a certain appeal then for the typical, as you said, developer coming out of Windows, because most of those folks, it's all about functionality. It really isn't about beautiful graphics and UX and such. It's much more about the functionality. They find it difficult to be that concerned about whether or not something is pixel perfect on the iPhone. That as long as the mobile app that they're producing works there for typically a fairly small audience, then they just don't worry about it. So for them, this is a pretty nice sweet spot. Whereas if they produce an app that blows up and becomes really popular, and people start griping about the fact that it doesn't look right on iOS, exactly, they have a way to go fix that.
Exactly. And and that specific topic about I want to just drop an app and don't have to think about design is why WinForms is still popular.
Yes.
I really want this entire area, Microsoft and you folks and everybody, to evolve towards being able to just get these apps out quickly without people having to know so much. Windows Template Studio was actually a step in the right direction, and I hope we'll see a lot of other things that will help some of these people bridge the gap and be able to knock apps out pretty fast.
Yeah, definitely. I think MSIX, that technology helps, and I'm interested in, Jérôme, on your take on WinUI. Now, you probably worked with the WinUI team a lot in the last couple of months, since they're trying to innovate and come up with a new way of building the graphics system for Windows. So my question there would be, let me go back. From what I understand is this is what they were explaining during the build conference, is that we have the OS, which has got its own systems. And over the years, the different UI technologies have tapped into that in different ways. And what they're trying to do now is lift those all out basically into a common API. And then I can go and in my WinForms app or my WPF app or my UWP app, I can start targeting WinUI and get the new features. Is that a good summary?
Well, it's actually twofold. The first one is all about getting access to platform features. from wherever you want, especially from Win32, what they're calling Win32 host applications. So it's all about your WinForms application, WPF application, without having the sandbox stuff getting in your way. And that is all about, if I want to access something that's fancy new coming from UWP, I want to be able to use it wherever I'm from, and that's the part about lifting everything. And the other part is about WinUI. And WinUI is another type of lifting. Is just they're pulling out everything that was tied in Windows, and that's why that's probably why it's taking that much time. Is that they're allowed to use private APIs. And do things with private parts of Windows, if you will. That's something that's decoupled with the decoupled from Windows is not able to do. So that kind of things takes time, and working with them, understanding how that works, allowed us to get access to understand why they're doing this and how they're doing this, and align properly with them with WinUI 3 and augment the coverage that we are having inside of Uno.
Well, my general impression of this, and of course this is all pretty new, so you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that one of the big advantages here is if you wanted to sort of combine these different APIs into one application before, it was a fair amount of work on your part to route everything and get everything right. You had to have host controls and a lot of other things going on that were kind of clunky to use. And so your responsibility for the traffic cop aspects of getting things to the right rendering stack, et cetera, was pretty high. And that now, so with that stuff kind of abstracted into one layer, that your traffic cop responsibilities are quite a bit less, if I understand correctly. Is that a acceptable take on it?
It's probably something like that. Still is that if you're using WinUI, it's something that if you have let's say WinUI control that needs to be hosted inside the WPF, it still is two different worlds. They're probably going to be allowing those two technologies to behave with each other a lot better without having to not have to dance too much. But that's pretty much something that they're trying to do. But still is it's still two technologies that are very different. They're helping the two to talk to each other, and with forms as well.
Yeah, WinForms is still, if I remember, it's still rendering with GDI.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why you have to have the host windows. And they said they hit in the WinUI. I saw some announcements on it. They haven't got the host stuff working yet. That's coming later in several months, I think.
Yes.
It's fascinating to me. I first got interested in it because I did a bunch of work with animation in WPF. And if you've ever had a lot of animations in WPF, you know that you hit a certain threshold and suddenly your frame rate just plummets.
Yes, yeah. That can happen.
60 frames a second to 2 frames a second.
Yes.
Because it just gets overwhelmed. And that was one of the issues that they had. And they fixed most of that in UWP, but they took away a lot of the animation stuff that I liked working with. And so what first enamored me about WinUI was when they first started showing their new animation engine. It was fast, and so that was like I'm all over this.
The composition API, the composition engine is really, really fast.
Yes, so I'm interested in playing with that at some point. I know I'm going to do a course on it, WinUI 3 course, probably beginning of next year. So I'll have some fun learning that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how my text crawler thing that I showed you earlier, Walt, how that
works. You should show us that.
Well, okay, let's.
We are almost out of time here, so why don't you show that, and then we'll just do a couple other questions and close out.
Close it out. All right. Let's. I've got it up over here.
Okay.
Let's start it. This is a UWP project. I wrote this about 4 years ago, but had to rewrite it for C# and Visual Studio 2019. Some minor things changed in Windows itself. Let's see if this works okay. Sometimes, yeah, there we go. This is like at the beginning of a famous movie that I will not name. Just to make sure that nobody is bothered by it. I got the idea back up because we have the projections in UWP that we had in Silverlight actually, but we don't have in WPF.
Exactly.
So
yes.
when UWP came along with the projections, I wanted a project to use projections. So this is actually a text box showing all of this text. and an animation applied to the text box to cause it to scroll up the screen, and it scrolls up and finishes everything, and then fades out, just like the one in the movie does. And by the way, people can have this. We can put a link somewhere, or I can put it up on Twitter so that you can get your hands on this. You'll need Visual Studio 2017 or 2019 to do it. But yeah,
the frame rate looks really good on that.
It's actually not bad. All things considered, the frame rate is pretty good, but I think it could be just a little smoother. And just to let people know, it does actually let you load whatever file you want into it and play that file.
So can we see the XAML on that? Is it just
sure.
You're using the projection tag?
Yeah, here's the and I actually did it with some of the old Windows 8 stuff because I was familiar with it at the time. So there's the grid the scroller's going in, and that's what's actually kind of being scrolled. And there's
there it is.
The projection, pane projection.
Yeah, that's actually so that canvas is showing the text block, and then the projection causes the angle to be done, and then we've got some other support stuff, and then I did actually, because the animation's kind of messy, I did actually have to put the animation in. It was easier to do that in code than it was in XAML, because I do
writing animations was really, I used to use Blend for that all the time.
Well, that's really good. But anytime you want to kind of calculate some things as part of the animation, it turns out that it's animations in code are not that hard. Once you've done a few of them.
That's where Xbind is interesting. Xbind can do lots of things.
Yeah.
What have you done with it, Jerome? With Xbind?
Oh, we implemented almost all of it. So it's all about getting, everything that people from WPF, devs from WPF are trying to do, like multi-binding and things like that. They're available through Xbind. So you can call a function and have static constants instead of a call and things like that. That's very neat.
So your next big roadmap then is to get something done for the Apple developer event?
That's going to be UnoConf. UnoConf.
UnoConf is when is that?
I wanted to ask about that because I spoke there last year, and I didn't know whether or not you were still going to do a live event this year.
Yes, we're going to be having a live event. The date is not settled yet, and that's pretty easy because we can change rooms very easily now. So it's going to.
Lots of spare capacity.
Yeah, spare capacity, and landlords are not angry at all if we change. So it's probably going to be somewhere around June or July. So we don't know exactly, but it's going to be. I think, or maybe we do have the date available. So I'm going to poke Sasha. Is going to know. But we're going to be announcing a few things there. With regards to could be Linux or a few other things like the programming models that we announced yesterday as experiments. So that's going to be there.
It's exciting. This is really an exciting platform for me, and I am looking forward to working with it more. Thanks you so much for joining us this week. For those that are watching, next week we have Clint Rutkus on, who's going to be talking about Windows Power Toys. They're doing some really interesting stuff. They just made a bunch of announcements yesterday, and I'm in particular interested in figuring out how you build a tool like that plugs into the Windows OS so smoothly. And then the week after that, we have Michael Hawkers coming on to talk about the Community Toolkit. So we got a couple of good shows. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jerome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.